morning. My name is Mike Huisman. I've been a member of Open Door Church for 25 years. I grew up in a rural town in central Iowa, very small community. The population was less than the number of people that attend this church. Grew up in the church, had a Christian family. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. My dad was a Sunday school teacher and a deacon. I knew the verses. I could color the pictures. I knew the flannel boards. I knew all that, but it wasn't until a youth trip on the banks of the Iowa River that I was saved. And going back into those days, we were camping out by the river, and we chopped down a tree and turned it into a cross, and we nailed all of our problems and our concerns and our challenges in life onto that cross, and we burned it. And that night we studied John 3:16, which, if you know that verse, it's basically, if you condense the entire Bible into one verse, that's the verse you would pick. And that's what saved me at a very early age. I went through high school, college. My religion was really on the back burner. I looked at my religion as I had my free pass to heaven. There's really not much more I needed to do. And I really looked at God as kind of like a first responder. I was on my own, and then when things got bad, I would be on my knees praying for help. I'd make a few deals that I'll be a better Christian. And when the storm passed, I would go back to my normal behavior. I went to a large university, Iowa State University. Attended there, graduated in 1990. I moved right to Kansas City. There weren't any jobs in Iowa with a technical background. So I moved to Kansas City, picked up a job downtown Kansas. Didn't know anyone in this whole city. I moved here. I actually baled hay to raise money for gas to get to Kansas City. And I worked for about a year. And I looked at my life list, and I had a job, I had a degree. The next on it was to get married. And embarrassed as how lightly I took that decision, but I went back to my hometown, a girl I had been dating back in Iowa, and we got married, and it was a complete train wreck. God wasn't part of our marriage, and within a few short weeks, I found out that she'd been unfaithful. Mental illness entered the picture, and we just went our separate ways and got divorced. So at this time, I'm 25. I have one divorce, and I'm just heads down working. That's one thing I could control. Worked on my career, and then about 2 years later, I ran into a person at the place I was working, and I thought this could be my wife. So this would be wife number 2. And at that time, still God was not part of the equation. I never reached out to God. I never prayed about who I would marry. Had it under control. And we looked for a place to get married, which is where Open Door entered my life. We started attending this church. We got married in this church. And about 3 years later, well, probably 2 years later, my wife at the time was full-blown into drugs. And not just marijuana. It was cocaine. It was the heavy stuff. And basically just destroyed our lives. Looking back, it was embarrassing that, one, I didn't realize what was going on, but I'd never been around drugs, so I didn't really know what was happening, and I didn't understand it. But it took our marriage and completely destroyed it, and we ended in a divorce. But what was different this time is I lost everything. I had a house with 0 furniture. I had an air mattress that I slept on. I had a 21-inch TV that I had in college, and that was it. That's where I lived. I'd work in the executive suite at the company, and I'd come home and I'd sleep on my air mattress, and I'd watch TV on my little screen TV. But what was different is through my relationship at Open Door, I created a very strong network. I had a mentor, Bill Kincaid, who really helped me through the difficult times. But I had friends I could lean on. I had a church I could go to. I was involved in the prayer breakfast. At the time, we were building this church, so I was Saturday morning cleanups, but I spent a lot of time at church and hanging out with church members, which really got me through the tough times. But I looked at my life as damaged goods. My career was going along great, but I didn't have a wife, and I wanted to be a husband. I wanted to be a father, and I started reaching to God to say, God, help me find this woman. Help me find my next wife. Because I had 2 marriages, both of them ended poorly, so I had a lot of baggage. And on the outside, I felt damaged. I felt, who would date someone like me, and let alone marry someone like me? So it was awful. And at that time, I noticed there was this really beautiful girl sitting about 3 rows in front of me at church. And over time, I kind of reached out to people and I said, what do you think? Would she date me? So the Open Door Network went out and they said, yep, she'll date you. So I had the green light, but I was still scared because I knew she'd let me down because I had 2 marriages. Who would want to date someone like that? But I reached out and timing was perfect. After 2 months of being afraid to call her, reached out, called her, we went on a date, and boom, God was involved and our lives just went through the roofs. We started dating, and in 6 months we were married. And when God's involved, things work the way they're supposed to work. We built a brand new house. Of my career, I was promoted to director at the company. In a year, we had a son, and 2 years later, we had a daughter, and life was good. But there was a storm brewing, and 6th year into our marriage, I found out my dad had esophageal cancer. And it's deadly stuff. And my dad was one of my best friends. But I knew God had this under control, and I knew he was going to see us through it. And this was going to be the miracle that my family had hoped for, that we could use to be a testimony to God and the strength that he had. And oddly, a year and a half later, every day was worse than the day before. And it was hard to see how God was going to work this out, but I still believed he would. And finally, we were told he wasn't going to live. And 18 months later, he died. And I was devastated. How could God let me down? I prayed. I'm a church member. My family believes in God. I was a deacon at the time. I just couldn't understand how this could happen to such a great man. And I distanced myself. I kind of pushed God away. You didn't help me. I'm really not excited about this anymore. And I went to a church service, my mom and dad's church, and it was on Job. And if you ever had a rough day and you think yours is awful, you should read about Job. And your day will not compete with his days. He had ungodly, horrible luck, and everything went bad for him. And I started studying Job, and I studied how he got through it. And there was a verse in there that really stuck with me, and it's when Job is lost everything, his health, his family, everything, and his wife is there, and his support agent, and she's telling him to turn on God. Don't believe in God. Why would you do that? Look what's happened to you. And there's a verse, Job 2:10, where he looks at his wife and he says, shouldn't we thank God not only for the good but also the bad? You want to take your religion to the next level, you get on your knees and thank God for the bad stuff that's happening in your life. And that verse has really hung with me since then. It got me through the loss of my father. And it gets me through a lot of the challenges I have today. Not, God, why is this happening to me? Because as a Christian, you think you're exempt from anything ever happening. I've got the free pass. Things aren't going to happen. I'm in good shape. But that's not true. You're going to deal with things. And you may deal with more things than non-believers. But it's how you handle them and how your walk with God is. And I can tell you, during the greatest days, my walk from God is separated. During my worst days, they're closer. And that's how my relationship is with God. So I got through that. I still, to this day, there's a void in my life. I miss my dad. I miss him every single day. But I've worked through that. We worked out about 8 years later. I was having some back issues and had some tests run. I was on a business trip, and Beth called me, and she goes, "Well, the results are in, and you have cancer." And, there I was in Chicago in a hotel room by myself, and I hear that I had the same disease that my dad did. Now, mine was kidney cancer, but when you hear cancer, and if any of you have ever heard cancer, your brain goes places that are awful. Your first thought is, I'm not going to live. I'm going to die. And that's where I was. And my first thought was, how could God do this to me? The same disease that killed my dad. But I quickly stopped and I said, you know what, Lord, help me through this. Help me get through this. And my prayer at that time was, one, if I have cancer, help me get through it. Give me the strength to deal with the chemo, the radiation, whatever I need to do to get through it. Or if it is my turn to go, and help me get through that, help my family, help my wife who'd been a widow before, help my kids who were young at the time, help them deal with what life will be without a father. And that was my prayer. And I had surgery. They removed part of my kidney. And as I walked out of there, I was ready for what was going to happen. I continually prayed to God to say, watch over me, keep me strong, keep my faith up, and help me deal with what I'm looking at. And we got the results back from the doctor, and God didn't answer either one of my prayers. He didn't answer, heal me from cancer. He didn't take me, but it wasn't cancer, which is something we never even thought about. God had come through in an option that didn't even make sense or wasn't even part of the prayer request. Our two prayer requests was, I'm going to go, give me the strength to do it and protect my family, or heal me from it. And I was given an option that didn't even make sense to me. And I just was in awe of God's power, God's strength in helping me through that time. And it's been that way through my whole life. I brought this little plaque. My good friend Bill Kincaid made it for me. It says, "Why me, Lord?" And that's how I look at things. It's not a negative of why me, Lord, but what am I going to learn out of this, God? What are you going to teach me out of every event I come in? This plaque is right beside my alarm clock. Every morning I wake up, I see it. Every night I go to bed, I see it. And it's just a reminder of God is there. God is working with me. I will have problems. We're all going to have problems. No one is exempt from that. But how do I handle them? What do I learn from it? How do I grow from it? And that is what I take in every day. As a couple, my wife and I have been through some amazing things. He has blessed us beyond belief, but we've also had many challenges. We've had miscarriages. My wife was a widow. I've been through 2 divorces. We've had career challenges. Everything that everyone else deals with, but I have a godly wife, which I am blessed. I married up. You hear that say, I went from here to here. God had blessed me, and I was given a life partner that we together take on a lot of this stuff. And I would challenge each of you is, as you go into things, stop and not feel sorry for yourself, but go, God, what am I going to learn out of this, and what are you teaching me? I hope you have a great day, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.